This is a liquid sunshine day in the Bahamas.
Good day.
Today's ceremony is going to be brief, but I promise you that it is going to be an exciting one. And so we need to get started right now. May I invite you to stand, please? Have you all here assembled on this historic site? We've got so many distinguished persons assembled under this tent. And so to establish a protocol, to acknowledge our dignitaries, and to advance the welcome address is the chairman of the Antiquities, Monument and Museums Corporation, Mr. Courtney Strawn. Help us invite him to the podium, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. Ladies and gentlemen, let me lend my welcome as well to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and again extend on behalf of our minister more blessings of liquid sunshine. Mr. Lindsay Brock, President General of the National Society of the Sons of American Revolution, and other distinguished officers and members of the society. Vicky Thomas, Regent of the Bahamas, chapter of the National Society of the Daughters of the American Revolution. Mr. David, and I hope I'm saying it right, Hazaran, Regional Security Officer, and other Marine officers of the American Embassy. Ms. Angela Major, President of the Bahamas Historical Society. Mr. Eden Zonical, President of the Bahamas Heritage Association. My good friend, Mr. Harrison Thompson, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Tourism, and other Ministry of Tourism directors. I don't see the Reverend Prince Bodie, the chaplain of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Dr. Keith Tinker, Director of Antiquities Corporation, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Let me again extend a warm and heartfelt welcome to you as we come to celebrate this opportunity of this event. It is indeed our pleasure to come to this site of Fort Montagu, which is such an historic site. And if I may just share some light on the significance of this day. Fort Montagu is one of the historic sites that falls within the mandate of our corporation. We have come to recognize the significance of a particular event that happened at this site, the Battle of Nassau in March of 1770, and to speak into the history of the lasting relationships between the Bahamas and the United States as a result of such a significant confrontation. So while we continue, let me again welcome you and enjoy yourself while you're in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the chairman indicated, Dr. Keith Tinker is the director of the AMMC. Dr. Tinker is also a historian in his own right, and he will come now to present an overview of the historical significance of the Battle of Nassau. Please welcome Dr. Tinker to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Flowers, and good afternoon to all. Protocol has already been established. And before just going into my notes, I'd like to add my note of appreciation and welcome for all of our visitors, whether they're from here, from the island, or from overseas. who have come to celebrate this occasion with us. You know, March, in fact, if we take the entire year of 1776, it was an extraordinarily eventful year because it was the year that literally impacted the history of the entire world. Slow at first, but it's an event that really needs to be marked. And for some reason, we in these islands don't celebrate it as much as our neighbors to the north, primarily because we don't like to talk about an invasion. But that's the reality of what happened, quite frankly. And there were so many quirks. Because here is Commodore Hopkins, who was sent to patrol the eastern seaboard, primarily against incursions by the British. The sons and daughters of the revolution, if I may address you as such, your forefathers were literally just assembling yourself had just assembled yourself, I should say, into the Continental Congress. And with that came your Continental Navy, the embryo of the now famous United States Navy. And you were just getting things started. Because what you were saying is, because you're not allowing us adequate representation, we're not going to pay any taxes. That was simply it. And that was the rallying cry, largely. And so you were just literally in the last throes, I can add, of literally forming yourself into a nation. Because this was even before the Declaration of Independence was signed. You were literally just moving towards it. The irony is, you were a couple of colonies along the eastern seaboard, maybe arguably occupying maybe 1/12 of the entire United States as we know it now, or probably slightly more. And you were vetting yourself against the most powerful maritime nation in the world. But it took courage. It took courage for you to basically do that. And in the end, we see what happened. The great United States emerged. But as I was saying, Hopkins was supposed to patrol, and he thought an easier prey, quite frankly, would have been, let me come down to Nassau because I heard that they got a lot of stores of ammunition down here, gunpowder, because here were 13 colonies organizing themselves to go to war and didn't have the armament. The artillery simply wasn't there. George Washington himself, who later became your first president, indicated to Congress, to the Continental Congress, listen, I have to have at least 200 barrels of powder. Of course, he didn't get it because it wasn't there to give. So one little birdie told a larger eagle, you understand what I'm saying there, a pun on the words, that down in Nassau was a store of powder. Ironically, Lord Dunmore, who became the governor here, at that time was the governor of Virginia. And he decided that, listen, this war not going very well. Let's send all of the munition from Virginia down to Nassau to hide. But like I said, the one little birdie told the larger eagle. And the eagle decided, we're going to go down and get it. Hence, Hopkins came down. And he came down with a force. Because here were 7 ships that finally got here. Now, several quirks came up. They landed somewhere up by Jack's Point, I guess. That's round the curve up where you see the fire coming from the boat. They landed somewhere up there. That is the irony of it all. Okay? We would like to take credit for doing it, but we can't. here is the fledgling United States Marines, 200 strong, 50 other personnel, landing up there. They came into Abaco. They were supposed to, like we say here, sneak into the harbor. But you can't sneak into the Bahamas without people knowing that you're here. And so the word got out, these guys came, let's start action. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however it may be told, our governor at the time, Montford Brown, governor of the colony, vacillated. He didn't move, even though the stores were here. Now we had two major forts. Montagu came afterwards, you had Fort Nassau. The stores were in, most of the munition was stored in Fort Nassau. The problem was Fort Nassau couldn't even keep a flea out because the walls were so pregnable. It literally served hardly no purpose, period. And the word came out, the governor got up out of his bed and said, listen, we got to do something. The problem was what? I wasn't sure what to do. So at the same time, the U.S. forces are anchored over just beyond there, beyond that point. And they're coming into town. But they decide they themselves will vacillate. And so they stayed up there and they camped out and they had a good time and maybe a bonfire, I don't know. But they had a good time. The bottom line about it is they landed. The governor sent one of his delegates out, Lieutenant Burke. He in turn asked the enemy, when he saw the numbers, he decided to hoist his white flag of truce. And he asked the enemy very politely in his British accent, what are your intents? And they told him, nothing more than to take your munition and go home. And so he went back to his superior, the governor, and said, listen, these guys come to rip us off, quite frankly. But it was indicated that we're not going to raid your houses, okay? And so what the governor did, according to some of the records, was, well, let's entertain the guys. I will send Burke back with some of the people, but I'll send them some of my personal liquor. And then he turns around and he complains that the officers drank all of his personal liquor. So that's part of the story, but it was a delay tactic apparently, because during the night they were able to load up most of the munition, roughly 160 kegs of gunpowder, and sent it up to St. Augustine in Florida. So by the time that the U.S. really were ready to come into town, they only were able to get about 40. There is so much more I can say except from the invasion of 1776, when it was adversarial, we now have a blossoming tourist industry where you now can come and enjoy our sunshine, whether it be liquid or not. Thank you so much for listening.
Stationary.
We're going to move right Bahamas, the region of the Bahamas chapter of the National Society of Daughters of American Revolution, to come and bring greetings at this time. Help us welcome her, please.
Good afternoon, President General Brock, other dignitaries, sons of the American Revolution. A little bit about the Bahamas chapter, DAR. On December 8, 2001, the Bahamas chapter of the American Revolution was born of English loyalists. I happen to be married to one of those loyalists whose family has lived in the Bahamas since 1783. The idea of forming the Bahamas chapter in the Bahamas began in 2000 with an email inviting members if they were interested in joining and would they be interested in forming a Bahamas chapter. Once we received word from Washington, D.C., they sent